Kappa Hawaiian FM 100.3, 99.1, and online at kapparadio.com. Enjoying another Kappa Kaiulu, and joining me again today is Officer Foxworthy with the Hawaii County Police Department. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Kay. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Officer Foxworthy, I've been chatting for some time, looking forward to this conversations today, specifically because I've been watching our media, the news line on what's been taking place and the safety, I would say, of our roadways in most recent times. Now, the question you and I spoke of when I first interviewed you, impaired driving. Impaired driving. I'm just going to ask you for that definition again, Officer Foxworthy. What is impaired driving?
So, impaired driving is when you take a substance that causes you to be able to not operate a vehicle in a careful and prudent manner within regard to drug impairment. Within regard to alcohol impairment or intoxication, it's with being unable to guard against casualty.
It's unfortunate as we've been watching, like I said, in the media of what's taking place on our roadways, why impairment affects driving. Now, let's talk a little bit about that because I think for the common folk, maybe there's a lack of understanding.
That's a really great question, which starts to diagnose and identify the issue or the problem. So one great way to say it, it's not my words, but it's part of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's campaign is if you feel different, then you drive different. And that's a great way to put it. It's simple and easy to understand. So when you're driving, driving is a very complicated task in which we divide our attention from hundreds of actions and decisions throughout the course of our being on our trip, traveling to our destinations. So we're doing things such as checking our gauges, our speedometers, our fuel, looking ahead of us on the road, 10 to 20 seconds, looking for potential hazards. We're looking in our peripherals, looking for pedestrians and cyclists that may be crossing the street, such as a child running across the road unexpectedly. We're looking in our rear view mirrors, our side view mirrors, controlling our steering with regard to making corrections and changing our speeds when things unexpected happen. So there's many different things. That's just a small list of many things that we do when we drive and divide our attention amongst these tasks. So when you think about impairment, it increases the amount of time it takes to make decisions or actions regarding these many different tasks that we're doing. And that's why it's very dangerous to impair ourselves when we choose to get behind the wheel.
Now, what are some of the commonly abused drugs? And now, when we say drugs, we're talking, just give us the list because I think when people see drugs, there's this connotation of illegal substances.
Okay, that's another great question. So drugs in our state are defined as scheduled drugs. So anything that's on the federal schedule, which lists all of the known drugs, and it's constantly updating. It's not a fixed number, but it's evolving constantly. So within law enforcement, we break it down into categories. We're trained to recognize categories which drugs fall into. And so I can list some different drugs in each category, starting with the most commonly abused drug, which is cannabis or marijuana. Many people are very familiar with this in the plant form. However, what most people don't know is within the last several decades, it's significantly increased in potency. The cannabis or marijuana from decades ago had a very low THC level, whereas now it can be upwards of 30% THC within the plant. So it's a lot different or potent than it was before. Also within this area, we have edibles, marijuana edibles, and concentrates where people process the marijuana, and it's upwards of 60 to 80% THC within these concentrates. So it significantly impairs you in even small dosages. So another category would be central nervous system depressants. And this is a really commonly prescribed medication or drug in that people with many different issues such as psychological issues or having seizures or things along these lines take these medications lawfully with a prescription from the doctors. So within this category would be like Xanax, Valium, Ambien, like a sleep aid. And so these kinds of drugs would have similar effects to alcohol. They would cause you to look like you're drunk, act like you're drunk, but you wouldn't have that odor. So they wouldn't have that smell of alcohol. Another category would be central nervous system stimulants. So this would be the category that methamphetamines and cocaine falls into. However, commonly and lawfully prescribed medications would be like Adderall, Ritalin, and these types of amphetamines are taken to help control ADD or ADHD, which many people take. So as you can see, there's a lot of different drugs in each category, which can cause impairment if not taken responsibly or if it's a new medication. Oftentimes people, when they start taking a new medication, they don't have a tolerance built up yet. And so in that first month or two, they are definitely more affected by the drugs, and it can cause impairment when they're driving.
Now, prescription medications. Can I drive safely when I'm on my prescription medications?
That's a very great question too. And it's a very complicated answer. So I'm very hesitant to say yes, because there's a lot of factors you have to consider each and every time. Each person would be a case by case. It's not as simple yes or a no. So what would make it a yes would be if they've been taking the medication for a very long time and they don't feel different. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because sometimes you cannot be aware that you're impaired. What makes it dangerous though is when you take any other medication such as Tylenol, aspirin, ibuprofen, any over-the-counter cold medications, that would amplify whatever medications you are taking. So also what would be a factor is if you ate, if you consumed any alcohol, even if you had only say one beer and you took your prescription medication, you would be significantly more impaired than if you did either one by itself. So it's a very complicated answer. And what I would caution the public to do is if you are unsure, if you have any doubt, just find a ride, call an Uber, a taxi, whatever arrangements you want to make so that you can be safe, as the rest of the public should not be exposed to you choosing to drive when you're impaired.
I know the percentage rates has gone up in regards to impaired driving, like I mentioned when I opened up the interview today. Is there any closing thoughts, Officer Foxworthy?
Sure. So if you think about it, in 2020, we had quite a bit of crashes. We had 26 fatal crashes, and 21 of them involved impairment to some degree, whether it was alcohol, drugs, or a combination. Drug impaired driving is on the rise. And one thing we can do as members of the public is be more vigilant. So most people are impaired during the evening time or the holidays or the weekends. So during those times, especially, we need to be much more careful deciding whether we need to drive or not, and looking out a little bit more carefully than we would during the daytime when there's less impaired drivers on the roadway. If we do see impairment, what we can do is make sure we're safe, call 911 and report it so that somebody doesn't get killed by this driver, including the driver. We also want to protect the drivers that may make these choices as well, because we don't want anyone to lose their lives unnecessarily. This is 100% preventable situation. And just by taking that little extra bit of caution, taking away someone's keys, preventing them from being able to drive, you could be saving a life. There's no way to measure how much good you do by preventing it, because it never happens. But it's something that we can all do. Even if you don't want to get involved, you can still make a phone call anonymously to us, and we can still stop that person from hurting themselves or other people. So just being more vigilant during the times like holidays and night times will really help us out, because we can only be in so many places.
Officer Foxworthy, thank you again for your time and sharing this great information to keep our community safe.
Thank you so much.